Hello again, and I'm going to start this video with a confession. I lied. This is going to be another video with me just standing talking at you rather than getting hit in the head. But that video is coming next week. What I realised was there was an extra thing I wanted to talk about that I don't necessarily need a partner for, so I'm going to cover that first before we get stuck into things. So, I start with an apology on that. So, what we've looked at so far is kind of an introduction on how on the material we're using, how we're going to stand when we're using it. So we've looked at our narrow guards, which would be an equivalent here, as opposed to our wide guard where the blade would be much further back. So our narrow guard might be here, and our wide guard will be here. Now, really I've put this video in because I think it's probably the biggest mistake made by every student I've ever taught. So I figured I'd just address it now because you will make it at some point, and I know I certainly did at some point. Once you come to start attacking, there is an urge to move the buckler out of the way. Because if we look at it without a buckler, we're quite used to doing, say, a mandriti squalembrato that cuts across the body here quite nicely. Now if I have my shield here, I'm actually cutting my own shield by doing that cut as I do it previously. So what you tend to find is that people will start lifting the shield and then dropping the shield, and now suddenly I have no defense as well. I might as well not be holding the shield at all. So one of the things you have to get very used to is cutting around the shield. So the shield stays put. Yeah, unless you have a good reason to move it, the shield will stay here, which means you have to get used to cutting. So normally we would start with drills like, say, well, we're going to start from guarded alta, and from there I will cut my mandriti squalembrato over the top of the arm, curl, and then do a reverso squalembrato on the inside to bring me down to my outside guard. The shield stays where it is, and I cut around it. But equally, that same sequence could be done under the buckler. So I need to also be aware that I could cut down here and down here to achieve the same thing. But either way, my buckler doesn't move. So it is one of these things you just need to get familiar with, is cutting around the buckler. So I can cut tondos above or below, squalembratos either side, rodoppios can be either side, but I need to get used to not moving the shield and adjusting how I cut in order to make that work. There is one exception to this, which is if I am, and it's a guard that you end up using quite a bit, across here in sottobraccio, and I want to deliver a reverso squalembrato, because it's normally quite a good cut, and as soon as you start sparring with this, you realize it's a cut you want to do. But it's very difficult to do without slamming into your own shield. So one of the few times we're going to move the shield is that when I'm here, I'm going to turn my hand over. Now we talked about holding the shield at 45 degrees rather than at 90 degrees or 180, we want it about 45. And what that's going to allow me to do is when I turn my hand, it opens up that side. So from here, I can turn my hand and deliver that cut out quite nicely. So one of the few times I'm going to move the shield is just turning it over. And as soon as I've done that, I'm going to turn it back again for whatever is my next attack. If you're comfortable with that, and if you've studied some of the early material like FAC 1, etc., what you would see is that hand turns and the cut comes, and then that hand follows it down as a cover before I start going into a thrust. Now we're not going to do that, we're just keeping that little turnover to free up. But once I'm familiar with that, I can start, anytime I'm cutting a ridoppio, I can turn the shield over. So in that earlier drill I looked at, I could cut down and then turn the shield so that I'm creating gaps for the blade to move through so I can actually cut even closer to my hand, closer to the drills I'm used to by turning my shield over. But my shield always stays out in front of me as a defensive tool. Okay, I promise you next time I am going to move on. I'm going to look at how to use this defensively, and we're going to start looking at how to attack back and actually use it. But it's important you understand this because it is quite a weird weapon. It doesn't operate like a shield, it doesn't operate like a dagger, and you need to understand that in order to make good use of it. So, I shall catch up with you next week, and I promise I will let somebody hit me in the head. Okay, until then, take care.